The Masters Tour Las Vegas continues throughout round 11 coverage. We're coming to the beginning of the end, TJ, as after round 11 has been filled, we have one last round to determine who's going to the top 8, who is going to make that final cutoff for money, as well as invites to Bucharest and Seoul. Bucharest, of course, being the third Masters Tour stop that's announced just a couple of days ago. My name is Frode. I'm joined by TJ Sanders. We're going to be bringing you guys Torph versus GivePls. And GivePls is a player that we saw yesterday playing the Rogue, and Torph is playing the Cyclone Mage. Does have some of that tech of the Magic Dart Fraud and Vex Crow, which might be more useful, but for now, we're going to find out if whether or not the core deck of the Mage can go up against the Rogue.
Yeah, and one thing that I wanted to point out, is that we've seen, maybe it's our sample size of broadcasted matches, but as we start to slim down on players and players start to get dropped at that 4-loss point, we're seeing a lot of Cyclone Mages come out of the field as with high records. Dan just pulled up the stats right now. Mage itself has a 57% win rate across the field, which I believe is the highest win rate of any class.
It is.
And
the second being Hunter and Rogue. Actually, Hunter, Rogue, and Druid are all tied at 50% win rate.
Yeah.
Paladin is number 5 at 49. Warrior at 48, Shaman at 42, and I believe Zoo Warlock in 8th at 33%. Priest, of course, having a 0% win rate. Apparently, it played one game against Priest, or sorry, against Rogue.
And
not
then
sure how that worked.
dropped.
And then dropped. Not sure how that worked exactly, given that you have to play 2 games, but maybe that's just a little bit of a counting error.
Yeah.
Taking a look at the deck list from GivePls, he is playing the tempo variant of Rogue that has the Burgle package, but doesn't have the Burgle package, but still has, elements of Spear of the Shark. Does have a very interesting tertiary deck with Belligerent Gnome and Fan of Knives in case he end up running into, say, a Token Druid, right, being able to take that out. Very interesting that the secondary tertiary deck's being used to try to address certain matches that they think they'll be hitting, but not really that popular in this field. No,
not really that popular, and we did get word that GivePls will be playing his secondary deck, I believe. And one interesting to note is that despite a lot of players thinking that Rogue was one of the hardest counters to Mage, even with a 193-game sample size, Mage is still boasting a 50% win rate against Rogue, which is a lot higher than you'd expect when you consider even, some of the more value-oriented variations of Rogue being counters.
Yeah, I think that it's surprising because we expected Rogue to crush it, and then it was losing going to the number 2. It was actually 45%.
Yeah.
So on average, it was a losing matchup, and then recently, as the Rogue players were progressing throughout the event, we're starting to pick up more wins against the Mage. You can call it variance. Maybe some of the players who were doing well with Mage were understanding how to beat the Rogues. And then the Rogues started picking up later on as well. Yeah.
What to do?
But getting into this game number 3 here between Torph and GivePls. GivePls starting off with Edwin Van Cleef in hand, but not much of a way to juice it up yet. Has the coin. But Mage, one of the things that they don't do well is get on the board early outside of very specific interactions like Sorcerer's Apprentice into Banana Buffoon. And while Torph has Banana Buffoon, no Sorcerer's Apprentice to kind of get that engine going more quickly. And because GivePls is on that secondary deck, he does have like a copy of Walk the Plank, 2 Saps, 2 Fairy Dragons. So you can tell that this deck is pretty much entirely for Mage. Walk the Plank allows you to handle the on-curve Giant. Fairy Dragon is something that is exceptionally difficult for Mage to deal with because they can't ping it and they can't Ray of Frost it to try and buy some time by freezing it out of the game. And Saps are just kind of always good because it interrupts those kind of big turns that the Mage wants to set up for Conjurer's Calling.
Yeah, if they can get it set up. Torph's hand right now is kind of a lot of nothing. Does have like Banana Buffoon Sorcerer's Apprentice. It does call into question whether or not Torph wants to play things like Sorcerer's Apprentice on 2, knowing that his opponent can coin out the SI7 agent. It is really tricky, though, once you've missed that window, because he drew Sorcerer's Apprentice on 3 and had Banana Buffoon. It just tends to make much more sense towards the slower matchups. However, I feel like Rogue is so fast that you need to fight for the board, otherwise you're going to be in trouble a lot.
Yeah, especially with this variation of Rogue from GivePls, where, as you mentioned, not playing the Burgle package, and is playing Hench Clan Thugs, which can snowball out of control very quickly if you don't find a way to deal with them right away.
Look at the match history bar. I feel like the secret has confused the UI. It's this white blank screen.
It looks like we just took MS Paint and colored it in white so nobody could know.
Yeah. So GivePls testing for counterspell, testing for mirror entity. It's all about whether he wants to attack, but if he doesn't attack, his opponent is just still going to ping the evil Cable Rat, sees the Vaporize, Hench Clan Thug is down, but another threat was generated through Edwin Vancouver, which is what's important here.
Yeah. Also, importantly, Ethereal Lackey was picked up, which with Spirit of the Shark, one of the better lackeys. I think just in a nutshell, probably the best lackey to get double the value from. Honestly, the best lackey to get single value from in most cases.
Yeah, I think that the Cobalt Lackey that deals 2 damage is still probably the most powerful one for my own preference, just because it tends to accelerate the Rogue game plan, versus the Ethereal Lackey tends to be more of like a latent power. It's like, oh, it's not only the spell you get, but the mystery you give to your opponent.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just like taking the 2 or 4 damage.
Fair enough. Let's see what's in the box.
Spirit of the Shark, Ethereal Lackey. Ooh. Daring Escape. I think we've learned our lesson last time from Necreon Vial. Oh my gosh. Another Necreon Vial.
Yeah.
He makes those choices really quickly. I guess it makes sense given that he wants to be aggressive. I mean, I could also foresee him being in a situation where he might need sprint to refill his hand. If the mage ends up just like plopping down, say, a Mountain Giant and Conjure's Calling in this position, what was he going to do?
Yeah, that's true.
Because he had 10 cards, and he would have to sap and do all this stuff. So he would have to basically throw his resources out to the board, and then would use. So he immediately goes for this instead of the High Spear and Togwalk, which just shows you how much he values that tempo instead.
Yeah. High Spear and Togwalk could have picked up that like sprint effect that you talk about with
right.
On, but
yeah. I mean, it just shows you that he's confident in his ability to win in the late game, even without necessarily having like the optimal shark value.
Yeah.
Be just like you.
Sea Giant plus Conjure's Calling can come down here as well as Mana Cyclone. So he can Banana, Elemental Evocation, then Mana Cyclone, play the Sea Giant for 1 mana, and then Conjure's Calling. He could still do it the other way around, where he Sea Giants, and then Conjure's Calling, and then Elemental Evocation, Mana Cyclone. That would give 1 additional spell.
Yep. Interesting that he does this before, I guess, the Frost Node, but we'll see the Conjure's Calling first. Another Sea Giant and Caligos. Apologies for the Spirit of the Shark being hovered over. This was a recorded match, so we can't do anything about it.
Well, if anybody at home did not know what Spirit of the Shark does.
Yeah, it's a stealth for 1. Your minions with battle cries and combos trigger twice.
Now read that over and over again until it goes away.
I think we're emphasizing what's the most important card on the board here.
It was sat for a split second, and now it's back to Spirit of the Shark.
Oh, up to no good. Me too.
Wow. Faceless Lackeys.
Face stacks are pretty weak right now.
Yeah. He's already got quite a full board, and honestly can't even. Well. I was curious if you even wanted to use this over, say, like Eviscerate. Because Sinister Strike not doing too much here, and maybe if another freeze comes out, you'd want board space to be able to do something else.
Yeah, but this looks like, from GivePls' perspective, that he's just trying to get as much onto the board. He already saw that Frost Nova. The second Frost Nova was generated through a Mana Cyclone. He also could just Blast Wave and clear off like most of this board too.
Yeah.
I
wonder though if it's more worth it to Blast Wave or more worth it to keep the board empty. Or keep the board full, sorry.
Yeah, I think I like the Frost Nova plan. But you have to count the damage. So you deal 20 over 2 turns with what's on board. If you Frost Nova and Conjurer's Calling, what's the way that your opponent can punish you? There's not that much, to be honest.
I mean, maybe another sap, because you're getting those 10 mana minions from Sea Giant, so they're very hard to replay, especially things like Deathwing.
But if that's the case, you still have the Blast Wave, and you can also invest into your hero power onto a minion, so that way you can avoid it. Oh, wow. All right. Okay. So decide to go for 1 card less so you can have that extra draw. He does pick up 2 snap freezes with the Frost Nova as well. This is just a lot of power.
Yeah.
And, you know, GivePls will have to withstand all of that pressure, plus that resource generation.
Now, GivePls does have a lot of damage from hand. 14 damage on turn 9 with Leroy plus double Eviscerate. So if you assume that this 4 damage is being pushed face, he only needs to pick up 4 more damage.
Yep, he can do it with like a Goblin Lackey now, with a Dagger. Dagger adds 2, so he'd be missing 1 more. Perhaps the Ethereal Lackey can help in this position.
Or even Faceless Lackey, maybe get a Bluegill Warrior.
Yeah, I think Ethereal Lackey is probably slightly more reliable for direct damage this turn, just because the Rogue gets so many spells. Yeah, there's actually a way that you can even play High Spear and Togwaggle, and so you can play the Ethereal Lackey first, see what spell you get. You can play High Spear and Togwaggle, and it still presents a 5/5 for your opponent to deal with, and then you can still set up for that potential lethal. Ooh, a Shadow Step.
Shadow Step, okay.
So Leroy, Shadow Step, Eviscerate.
Too soon.
Not enough mana to do that, actually. So he's just going to invest in it now.
The problem with investing in it now is that if a taunt comes down...
Double pay!
Wait, is this a lethal setup with double Eviscerate? Yeah, with double Eviscerate, he needed a dagger up as well. So next turn, this is a lethal setup if the dagger can go face.
Yeah, but then it's still the same thing that's blocking it, which is like mirror image, right?
Yeah.
I think this Leroy was to stop his opponent from, say, freezing the board and then playing mirror image. But yeah, and it's also like a case of like, are you gonna play around the secret of like Vaporize, or are you gonna play around the secret of an Ice Barrier, or you're gonna, or a counterspell? These are like all different things to evaluate given to how many random spells have been generated. Oh man. We don't even know what that secret is.
I think it's Vaporize?
Well, GivePls doesn't really have much of a choice here.
If he had 10 mana, it'd be guaranteed because he could test for Counterspell with Violet Haze and then just Life Drinker. Life Drinker, check for Mirror Entity, then Violet Haze, check for Counterspell, then double Eviscerate.
Yeah.
But if it is Counterspell, then there is no lethal. But if GivePls doesn't kill Torph this turn, then he's dead. Unless there's something from Violet Haze that can save him. But I honestly think you just kind of have to go for it. I don't think there's a way around it.
It doesn't look like anything you choose will result in a victory for you, so... I hear the rope!
I hear it.
I hear Eviscerate! That's a second Eviscerate! He daggers! He attacks! Torph is dead!
Cast it blind!
Nice job. GivePls improves to a 9-2 record, 1 series away from guaranteeing himself a spot in the top 8.
Such an exciting ending.
It just, really takes your breath away.
It takes at least your sight away. That's for certain.
All right. So a job well done to give plays, and I feel like in those positions, that's kind of what Mage is struggling with, stopping the rogue from killing. When they are in a position where they can get the freeze down, but can they stop direct damage from hand? And that's where things like Life Drinker, the Waggle Pick, Leroy Jenkins, Eviscerates are still really important to the deck.
Yeah.
And then also conversely, when people see Sea Giants and no Eviscerates in the deck, and they're wondering why they're playing more board centric. That's the reason why, because they don't have as much threatening damage from their hand as they'd like.
Yeah. And we have seen the Sea Giant version be successful, but especially if you're just playing straight up tempo rogue. With the Hench Clan thugs, your game plan has to be aggressive, and the Leroy's, the Eviscerates just make that happen even more. Love the Fairy Dragon inclusion too. I mentioned this in Grandmasters when we kind of first started seeing it as a secondary / tertiary counter to Mage. Oftentimes it gets in so much damage, makes that Leroy Eviscerate finish a lot easier in the later stages of the game. So excited to see some Rogue play. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of Mages, a lot of Warriors. I haven't got to cast much Rogue. I think that might be my only Rogue game that I've cast all weekend long.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is kind of insane. I know we've had some, but it feels like we've been kind of dominated by Mages.
Yeah, I mean, it's mainly Warriors. It's just been dominated by. But because there's so many Warriors, the Mages were doing well.
Yes.
Now we've come full circle because then the Rogues can come out to play. At that point. At least in theory. The win percentages do imply that Mage is still just really good, because if your worst matchup is Rogue at 50%, that just means Mage is in a class tier of its own.
I don't even know if this is indicative of the Rogue versus Mage matchup. It's kind of interesting because so many players I've been following Monsanto over the course of the weekend, who was doing pretty well, did bring Rogue, and said that he started off doing well against Mages and then just started to falter against Mage. And he said in day one that it's been a long time since he's even lost a match to Mage as Rogue. And we talked about the stats earlier, 50% in a matchup that so many people are like, yeah, that's very Rogue favorite. It's hard to win as the Mage, hard to get an edge. Kind of just an interesting thing to think about, especially with such a substantial sample size. It was like 200 games. Yeah. So very interesting.